Archimedes said, "Give me a lever and a firm place to stand, and I will move the earth." Give me a lever and a firm place to stand, and I will move the earth. I love that. I love that. I love Archimedes anyway. The soul and spirit of Syracusa, the last of the Greeks in a Roman-dominated world, a truly brilliant mind attempting to make his way in a world that has so little use for authentic brilliance and so much need of bland stupidity, so it seems. If you look at the top of selfadoration.com, you will see that the tagline is "A Firm Place to Stand," which is me tipping my hat to Archimedes, but also the implication is that your mind is the lever. Your mind is the lever that will move the earth, provided you have a firm place to stand. By which I mean to imply that ontologically consonant teleology, the philosophy that is defended at selfadoration.com, the philosophy that's defended in my book Man Alive, ontologically consonant teleology is your firm place to stand from which your mind can move the earth. At the time that Man Alive was published, April 8th, 2012, I said that that day would mark the onset, the beginning of a brand new age in philosophy, the age of splendor. What hubris on my part to declare that I am starting a new philosophical epoch with the publication of a slim little book. I'm delivering on that promise today. I think I deliver on that promise every day. I think Man Alive delivers on that promise enduringly and in remarkably insightful ways, but everything I've done since then has been building upon the arguments made in Man Alive, and from my point of view, building on the Age of Splendor. I am so far the only philosopher of the Age of Splendor, but I'm getting a lot done. I have no idea what everything done looks like. Everything done is a ways off. My take would be never done. There's no such thing as everything done. Anything can always be made better. But even though so far I'm working alone, I think I'm getting a lot of good stuff done. I think I'm approaching the problems that confront the human race, the problems that confront humanity, the problems that have confronted humanity from the birth of humanity. I think I'm taking those down one by one and taking them down in very interestingly dispositive ways. I am building upon our talk last week, me talking to the dads who listened to me, the nascent and incipient resurgence, redemption of the idea of hoplite fatherhood in the form of the hoplite fathers who are listening to me rhapsodize about hoplite fatherhood. And I think that's a good example of the kind of philosophical innovation that has resulted from the onset of the Age of Splendor, the underlying strategic defects that have led us to one error after another, starting from the idea of externalized ethics in the first place, the idea that the consequentialist moral arguments that we make emerge from the outside world and insert themselves into our life by means of intrusive pain. Whereas, in fact, the reality of the situation is exactly the opposite, that the universe that you experience is the universe of your experience. Your experience emanates from the inside outward, and your free moral agency emerges from the inside out. The outside world does not impose morality upon you. You impose morality upon yourself and blame it on reality. I don't consider morality an imposition. To the contrary, morality is a tool of survival, but it's only a tool of survival if you see it my way. This is what we're doing in the Age of Splendor is revisiting all of these philosophical errors and upending them because they're all perfectly upside down, they're all perfectly inverted, turning them upside down, turning them right side up, getting back to an understanding of moral philosophy that exists for the purposes of and in pursuit of the benefits of the moral actor. This is what ethics is for, is to achieve the objectives of the actor. This is true for all organisms, not just human beings. We don't describe what they do as being ethics, but it is ethically analogous. They are choosing in some cases by an act of will, not an act of free will, but by an act of will. In other cases, they are doing what they do because they are consigned to that behavior by their nature. But in any case, each individual specimen of every instance of living organic life is pursuing its own ends, its own benefits, its own purposes, its own goals, its own needs, its own internally consistent, ontologically consonant teleology. To the extent that that organism is capable of dealing with reality, it deals with reality appropriately, with one exception, and that would be us. Not to say that we necessarily deal with reality inappropriately, but we often do. We like to. We like to rationalize doing it, and we like to excuse it, and we like to blame the outside world when it doesn't work out. All of that changes with me. All of that changes with you, Dad, Mr. Hoplite Father. But really, all of that changes with your children. And so as much as I like talking to adult men, fathers now or fathers someday, I'm grateful to have them to talk to, they're already converted. They're already in agreement with me in huge measure, maybe not in every little particular, but the big picture. We're seeing the same universe. We're seeing the same stuff. We already agree with each other. I haven't so much as persuaded these men as I have given them better language for describing the world that they were already seeing. This is what I can do for adults for the most part. I can think of one person that I've actually persuaded in my life that he was a liberal and he's now a libertarian, and the result is the good influence that I exerted upon him at the right time. And the work was all his, and I claim no credit for it, and I don't endorse what he says. He doesn't endorse what I say, and all I was a very small influence temporarily, but just at exactly the right time to sway this one individual. It's the only example I can think of someone that I've successfully persuaded that if baptisms and bringing in the sheaves is the standard by which I am to be judged, then I am a failed evangelist. My evangelism is not devoted to adults because I don't believe in the persuasion of adults. I mean, I know I can get through to people. I can get through to thoughtful, open-minded people, and I can lead them in new directions. I can lead them toward my way of thinking. I know I can do this, and I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for those people because I'd have no one to talk to. You understand? I would have no one to talk to were it not for those people. So I'm very grateful. I'm grateful just that they're there for me to talk to. I don't require anything else from them. I don't need for them to have been persuaded of anything. I don't need it. I just need for them to be awake. I need for people to be awake. And too many, virtually all adults are sleepwalking. They're not listening to me, and they're not capable of being persuaded by me, but because they're not capable of being persuaded by anyone. They are done thinking. They don't intend to change. They don't intend to question their presuppositions. They don't intend to challenge their prejudices. They don't intend to learn better. They don't intend to do better. They intend to muddle through and then die someday. And then I have very little chance of talking to them except when they're in pain. And for the most part, they'll only be listening until the pain abates, and then they'll go back to doing whatever they were doing before. And yet, my job is evangelizing those hoplite fathers. I need to evangelize those hoplite fathers. And I don't have any way of getting through to them once they're 18, 24, 28, 34. Once they're grown up, I don't have any way of getting through to them anymore. I need to talk to them as children. This is an epiphany this week. How stupid am I? I've been talking for 2 years about, I would say now, redeeming the idea of egoistic vanity. That's the way I would say it now. When I first started talking about this, I was talking about comedy and tragedy because those are the terms that we always use to describe um, types of art. And I found those forms defective from the very beginning because they mean too much. That's the problem with them, that the words that we use tend to mean too much, and because they mean too much, they mean almost nothing. That when I say comedy, typically what I mean is a story arc where the action moves from worse to better. We start off in this kind of frumpy-dumpy, unhappy situation. The protagonist looks around and says, hey, wow, this is totally suboptimal. What can I do about this? Learns some new ideas, puts them into practice. We go through some real hard work in the second act, and poof, by the third act, we're redeemed and everything is better. It's not necessarily everything is perfect, but the initial chaos that we started with has been addressed, and it is now substantially better. The protagonist's life is better. This is the comedic story arc as far as I'm concerned, but that idea gets conflated with farce and with satire, neither of which are a part of what I'm talking about. And so I came up with the terms benedy and malady. Benedy, B-E-N-E-D-Y. Just like benediction, a benedy is a story where the action moves from worse to better. It's a good word, literally a good word. It's a good story. It's a happy ending. The much despised happy ending. And a malady is the opposite. It's a story where the action moves from better to worse. That where we start in the story is substantially better for the central characters than where we end in the story. And the challenge would be, oh, well, how can you tell one from another? Well, believe me, in cinema there are all different kinds of ways of telling, but the music is the real dead giveaway. The music in the third act will tell you whether what you're seeing is a benedy or a malady from the point of view of the creators of that particular work of art. But I've been talking about using benedy as a tool of persuasion for more than 2 years now. I've been hammering on this point, and this week a circumstance happened that kind of kicked me in the head, and scales fell from my eyes, a brand new world before me, and I see it all right there. The people that I can persuade are 8 years old, they're 10 years old, they're 12 years old. They're probably not yet 14. These are the people that I can persuade because they are capable of persuasion. They are past the age of conceptual fluency. They have woken up in father tongue. They are capable of communicating, thinking, persuading, and being persuaded in abstract notation systems. They are awake as human beings, and yet they have not yet habituated the lifelong graduated guile that older people, older children, start to use as their way of navigating the world. That in Self-Reliance, Emerson says, we acquire one form and figure, the same asinine expression, we wear the same uniform of our party, we become false in every particular. Our two is not the true two, our four is not the true four. We send our children off to school, and they don't learn to read, they don't learn to write, they don't learn to cipher, they don't learn to reason, but they do learn to lie. And they learn to lie all the time. They learn to live a life of lies. They learn to don a costume and comport themselves as if they were that costume. They live among other costume children, each in their own costumed cliques. They interact amongst each other as if they were costumed, and their two is not the true four, true two, their four is not the true four, they are false in every particular. And so the time to talk to those children is before they're broken. This is a malady in some, even that we have to think this way, that we have a world of broken children, a world of children who are growing up, who should have full-time, serious, self-responsible parents to bring them up right in the world, and they don't have it. And in consequence, it's repeat after me that at 8, they know that there's some strange adult world out there that they know almost nothing about. At 10, they know a little details. At 12, they know way too much. And by 14, they're in it. They're in that world of graduated guile in all directions. Everything is about what's in it for me, taking my vengeance on you, where I stand in the hierarchy of social status, who can I kick a few rungs down in that hierarchy. It becomes a world without egoists. No one is an individualist. No one is pursuing his own ends, his own goals, his own values, his own benefit for his own purposes. No one is doing that. Everyone is looking to the left, looking to the right, trying to look behind him, trying to figure out what everybody else is doing so as not to fall out of step. This is David Reisman. This is The Lonely Crowd. This is happening in public school. Private school, too. Don't excuse yourself. It's happening in the classroom. In an environment where the only way that the children can stay in the good graces of the adults is by perfect compliance with endless lists of arbitrary rules. And in an environment where they can only maintain an acceptable standing in the social environment by rigorous compliance to endless lists of arbitrary social conventions. The schools are a cautious tyranny, and they are, when they're paying attention, they're a cautious tyranny, and when they're not paying attention, they're an incandescent tyranny, but it all ends up being cautious tyranny. The only way to navigate that environment is to fit in. Meanwhile, we have substantial numbers of adult baby children. I mean, in many cases, the majority of children will be living in adult baby homes. Even if you give intact families every benefit of every doubt, they're still, in large measure, the minority among the families that are sending our children to school. So these children are in a situation where they really have to raise themselves, and they don't know it. The only behavioral guidance they get from adults is bad advice, not necessarily in the form of father tongue, in the form of verbal admonitions to choose poorly, but by consistent, unrelenting, unrelieved bad examples that are, as adults, we provide very poor examples for young people growing up, and in consequence, they repeat after us. They repeat all of our awful mistakes. I think this is a curable practice. And that's where I had my epiphany this week, was realizing that I need to be talking to 8-year-olds. I need to be talking to 10-year-olds. I need to be talking to smart children who look around at home and realize that their parents are themselves children, are not adequate to the task of raising a child, and that these children need to step up and raise themselves because there is no alternative. You're in this all alone. And they look around the classroom and realize that they are in a conformity machine, that it may not be the intended consequence of this thing to achieve the evil end result of chopping children up and turning them into homogeneous sausage, but that is exactly what this machine does, and this is completely inappropriate for the survival needs of the human race as a species, and for each one of us as an individual, discrete, living organism. This is a very bad philosophy being instantiated in our schools, and I think I see a way around it, or a partial solution in any case, that I want to talk to fathers, adult men who are fathers now or planning to be fathers sometime soon, adult men my age who are grandfathers and want to be better grandfathers for their grandchildren, but want to be better fathers and fathers-in-law, uncles-in-law, to the men raising children right now, the men in their lives who are raising children right now, to help young fathers do a better job of holding up their end, of living up to their obligations, help young fathers be better fathers so that their children will in turn be better fathers. This is one of the things that I said last week that was an eye-opener for me just when it came out of my mouth. I mean, I believe this. I believe in everything getting better all the time. I believe in better as a praxis. I believe in better, not perfection. Perfection is an illusion. It's an illusion that you use to talk yourself out of trying to do better. I believe in better. Everything can be better. It may never be perfect, but it can always be better. I believe in better. And yet, last week I said that each generation of fathers should be raising better fathers. That one generation after another, that we're always raising better fathers. And that was a real eye-opener for me, because it's not the way that we think about anything. It's not the way that human beings think about anything. To the contrary, when we think too far out in the future, we always get to dystopia. But even now, in real life, looking at the world around us, can you imagine, you look at the Gen X fathers and you roll your eyes, and you look at the Gen Y fathers and you roll your eyes, and you look at the Gen Z kids who are going to be fathers, and wow, you really roll your eyes. And are you able, in that circumstance, to look ahead to a future where every generation of fathers is better than the last? If I'm not insane, then we're living in the age of splendor, and I'm the only one who knows it yet. But this is a way of thinking about art, the idea of the egoistic vanity as applied to young adult fiction, to tween-age fiction, to talking to 8 and 10-year-olds about how to be their own fathers. Not just the boys, talking to the girls too, but talking to those children about how to father themselves in an underfathered world, so that they can create the kind of families that they wish they were growing up in. And this is a brand new category in young adult fiction. As I said, I've been talking about Benedy for 2 years, and talking about Benedy as persuasive art, Benedy particularly as a style of cinema for adults, like the movie Chef, which I rhapsodized a couple of months ago. There are a lot of indie movies in particular that I can rhapsodize in that way, that I can talk about this particular movie like Chef as a good example of an egoistic vanity, of a good example of a guy whose situation starts out pretty poor because his thinking has been pretty poor, and who over the course of the story learns better ideas and masters them, and in consequence makes his whole life better. His life, his son's life, his wife's life, his partner's life, everybody who is involved with this man is better at the end of the movie because he's learned and mastered better ideas. And that is the egoistic vanity in action. That's the story. That's all it is. It's such a simple story, and we love it. We totally love this story. This is a story you can tell all day, and people will always eat it up because they want to believe in a better world. They want to believe in a better future, and they want to learn how to get there. And you can lecture them all day, and you can write nonfiction books all day, and you can be like a cautious tyrant and shake your finger at them and tisk, tisk, tisk. No one was ever scorned or scolded into better behavior. But if you tell people a story, and you tell them a story about a guy who looks a lot like me, whose situation is a lot like mine, and then show how that guy made his life better, this is a good story. This is good entertainment. This is good fun for the whole family. And yet it is an anchor cast into the minds of every individual who sees that movie. It is a little snag in their thinking. It's something that will slow them down in the future when they're looking for excuses to fail, when they're looking for some kind of evidence of despair to grasp onto, to excuse them for not pursuing their values. They'll have that movie in their mind. They'll remember that story, and that story will give them what they need to soldier on, to press on regardless, to pursue their values relentlessly. And this is something that you can do for adults right now. This is a persuasive art that will work on adults now. If you tell this story over and over and over again, you will change lives. But if you tell stories like that to 8 and 10-year-olds, you will change the vector of those lives. Give me a lever and a firm place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me an opportunity to take a wide open mind and set that vector toward splendor, toward the achievement of appropriate human values. To take a child of 8 or 10 years old and help him calibrate his compass, help him orient himself on his maps, give him new and better maps to work from so that he can find his way to splendor, and you will change his whole life. Change his whole life forever, make his whole life better forever. Set that young man or young woman on the course towards splendor at an age when the child is young enough not to have wasted time pursuing dead ends, and young enough not to have soiled himself so enduringly that he can't imagine ever getting clean. You can take that child when he's clean and show him how to stay clean forever. With literature, with stories, with narrative art, with cinema, with television, with interactive fiction, video games. If you change the focus of the art that you create, you change everything in due course. Give me a lever and a firm place to stand, and I will move the earth. This is the age of splendor. You're living in it. You should make some kind of a permanent note somewhere that you were aware that you were living in the age of splendor before virtually all of humanity even knew it was happening, but it is happening. I'm showing you how it will happen. I am inventing an entirely new category of narrative art in the form of the egoistic vanity, but I am showing you a brand new category of content, period. Not just narrative art, not just fiction, not just cinema, but a new style of content, period. A whole new branch of human thinking, all based on the idea that the lever is your mind and the universe is yours to command by your thinking. You're in this all alone, but you should be glad of that, because that's what creates your potency. You're able to fix your world because you're the only person who can fix your world. And the art I'm talking about is the art of making maps toward fixing better worlds from the inside out, one mind at a time. And this is the Church of Splendor. And splendor is what we're aimed at. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm so glad to talk to you. I'll talk to you again next week.